I messed up tonight. I lost another fight. I still mess up, but I'll just start again. I keep falling down. I keep on hitting the ground. I always get enough. See what's next. Birds don't just fly. They fall down and get up. Nobody learns without getting it wrong. I won't give up, no, I won't give in till I reach the end and then I'll start again. No, I won't leave. I wanna try everything. I wanna try even though I could fail.
Welcome everybody to Minute 31 of the Zootopia Minute podcast, the minute-by-minute podcast where we review, analyze, and scrutinize the award-winning movie Zootopia. And we are back after a month of hiatus. I think we were all kind of caught up in the era of whatever was happening in May and June. I'm not sure what happened. I've been in a coma.
It's all a blur, man. Yeah, it's all a blur.
Alright, I am your co-host, Choco Pony, and apparently someone took that name on for Affinity, so I can't use it anymore.
Oh.
And I'm joined by my co-host,
Simul, how's it going, everybody? I know it's been a while, but it is great to be back with you. Thank you for being so patient.
It is Simul's special day since it's National Mascot Day, and he's one of the BronyCon mascots, so he's getting a lot of love today.
Yeah, that's true. We're recording this on National Mascot Day. So it used to be that Google would always be how I learned about obscure holidays, because the Google logo would change and it'd be a weird holiday or it'd be the birth of some historical figure. But now I also learn about a lot of holidays I never knew about through Twitter, through what's trending on Twitter hashtags.
Isn't it just strange that like every day is now some national something day?
I know. I'm pretty sure you could look at a calendar and every single day of the year is a holiday about something somewhere. I'm sure that's true. And there's a lot of overlap, too. There's a lot of days that share their holiday status with other special holidays all on the same date.
Yeah. All right. It's been a month since our live episode. We had a fun time at Everfree Northwest, but we will save that towards the end of the episode, and we'll discuss all the nitty-gritty fun stuff about that con and what we've been doing in the meantime. But before we continue with that, we're going to focus on Minute 31, which begins at timestamp 3100, where we have Chief Bogo, buy one get one, saying reckless endangerment of rodents, and it ends at 3159, where we have the little otter character coming in and saying please, just as Clawhauser runs in trying to stop her, saying I'm sorry.
Yeah, so intermittent to all that, basically this whole minute is Chief Bogo grilling Judy about what just happened in the previous several minutes we've been watching, this epic chase of the weasel through Little Rodentia. So Chief Bogo's not too pleased with Judy's actions in that regard. So right off the bat, we basically just get this list of horrible, horrible things that Judy has done. We had inciting a scurry at the end of our last minute, and we begin with endangerment of rodents.
Now, I'm assuming that scurry will only be used in the context of rodents.
That's a good question, because I feel like inciting a scurry, that sounds official enough. Like, that sounds like something I've heard before in the context of a real police report or something. But when I think about it again, yeah, what's a scurry? Like, a scurry sounds like something small little woodland creatures do. So maybe you're right. Maybe that's a rodent-specific thing.
And he did say reckless endangerment of rodents, so... Yeah.
Okay, yeah, several points on that, and that just made me think of something else too, which I'll have to remember. But endangerment of rodents, we've discussed several times that the police apparently are so set on not having Judy help, they're like, wait for the real cops. We had Officer McCorn from the previous few minutes saying, hey, wait for the real cops when Judy ran into Little Rodentia. But wouldn't it be more endangering to the rodents to have the big, full-size, massive cops go in there? I mean, what exactly are they expecting? Unless, as we've discussed numerous times now, and people are used to this idea, that maybe there was a separate rodent police force. I mean, what really could they expect?
Yeah, like, I guess we were talking about the last 2 minutes. We really don't know what their alternative is when trying to police the little rodent area. And we came to the theory that if they have their own private security force, or if not, it will lead to their own, like, mafia-style
private security.
Yeah, so it's kind of a curious case because she is the smallest cop on their force. So she would be the one actually best to deal with them. And like, what if she's already big enough that she would be stepping on mice? What would a rhino or a elephant officer do in that
Maybe they use
situation?
robots, like bomb squad robots or something, but they're like really small.
Yeah, I'm
robot
wondering how
mice.
advanced they are, because they do seem to be 21st century era, our decade.
modern
of level of
modern
technology.
times.
So, it's possible. Not sure yet, but then we're also more progressive. I don't know.
That's an
We
interesting
like to
thought,
think,
though.
We like to think of us as more progressives, but assuming that this follows our timeline and stuff, we probably would have allowed mice on the police force by then. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, that is another interesting thought, though. What if Zootopia took place in some other era? What if it was like medieval Zootopia? That'd be kind of a different movie then, I guess.
Or even outside the Western area, like what
if it was like an
a
East
Ming
Asian
Dynasty
culture?
Chinese,
that
or
being
Southeast
modulated.
Asian Indonesian culture. Like there's so much possibilities of how these animals would fit within any other cultural context aside from the 21st century Western cityscape.
That's something I'd been thinking about a lot recently, actually, is how Western culture is basically the dominant culture on Earth. I mean, there are obviously cultures that still persist to this day in, the Pacific Rim, East Asia, Africa, India, everywhere, essentially, has their own culture. But this sort of Western European culture that really began not even in Western Europe, but, with the ancient Greeks and all that, Western civilization, Western ideas have become
You're going to
very,
get all
very
the
dominant
Tumblr
on
people
Earth.
jumping on you saying,
Yeah,
you have a Eurocentric mindset. No,
that's the thing. The Earth is Eurocentric. Like, you can say, in Japan, people live in Japan and they live very Japanese lifestyles and all of that. But the thing is, in Japan, while they maintain a lot of tenets of the culture that has been in that area for thousands of years and has persisted for generations, they still wear Western clothing. English is the most common second language of non-native English speakers.
I was thinking about the idea of like the Western clothing thing, but it kind of makes sense that there will be like a global clothing. Like, I don't even think of like suits and ties and stuff as Western anymore. It has
right, because it's everywhere now.
Because it absorbs stuff. Like, if we want to think about Western Europe as well, they kind of absorbed all their knowledge from the Judaic tribes to all the way to the original code of laws of common man set up by the Middle Eastern empires of that time. Mm-hmm. Of course, the Islamic Golden Age was really influential on what we now know as the European Renaissance. And it's actually a weird mingling, but yeah, it is. People would say it's more Eurocentric than African-centric or something, but you can also say it's more American-centric because a lot of the stuff that we as Americans done, inventing the automobile, improving how technologies evolved from AC currents to the trains to the skyscraper, all that stuff really is post-American industrial revolution era stuff. But it's actually interesting because I was watching Recess the other day, another Disney TV show, and I was
that show.
I was like looking at Miss Grokey, and it's funny because in our modern context, we'll think of her as a silly nod to social justice people, but this was like a Disney show in the 90s, and she was saying, take these history books with a grain of salt because they only focus on white Western males and stuff like that. It's just like, oh, that's kind of awesome that they're able to do that back in the day, and shows that the social justice idea isn't a modern concept. It's been around since 60s.
It's been gestating for a while,
Yeah.
for sure, yeah. Well, all of this opens up an interesting question back in the world of Zootopia is, do you think the types of clothing they wear, the way their society has evolved, do you think that came from a specific subculture of like a certain species? Maybe it was the predators established that, maybe it was the prey established that, or even individual species. It could be like, elephants. Maybe suits and ties came from elephants for some reason, and like now everyone just wears elephant fashion, and elephants were the big global.
So I think you
It could
brought
be
that
any
up.
animal.
Suits and ties you think of as Western thing, but it's actually not Western. It's actually a niche area of Western culture where the idea of the tie actually came from Masonic lodges.
It's
Because
that branch of the tree is what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because when you think about how a secret society basically invented the tie to represent the noose around the neck, representing, fragility of human
I thought
life
it
and
came
sacrifice.
from an old military thing that was more like a scarf, and it evolved from that.
No, actually, it evolved from the Masonic lodges and the representation of a noose around the neck. That's why a lot of Asian cultures, when they started entering the global stage, initially refused to wear ties because it was so similar to like the idea of hanging. but now everyone's now adopting it.
Yeah, and the triangle-shaped knot at the top of a tie, that represents the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. It's the Illuminati.
Exactly.
Yeah. I want that tie now. I hadn't thought about that. I want a tie that has a little eye over the knot.
Well, the problem is you would have an upside-down pyramid. The right-side-up pyramid represents the all-seeing eye of God, but the upside-down pyramid, I don't think really has any representation in the secret society lodges,
devil?
but I currently use it in my story to represent the physical deities that are bound to
Bill
the physical
Cipher.
realm.
It's Bill
Yeah.
Cipher.
All right, but we don't want to go too off topic. But so one of the things that he's listing is, this, that, and that, all to rescue these moldy onions. And Judy says, they're actually a classy botanical. And she kind of shows her knowledge of plants and stuff, which I guess is understandable.
They're actually called Midnicampus Hodocithius is something. I wrote it down. I can't read my own handwriting. What is it? It's
Midnicampius
Midnicampum Holocithius. There you go.
All right. Yeah, but it's funny because it would make sense that she grew up on the farm, so she would know plants, but most farmers don't know the scientific details of plants like that, like the scientific genealogy names for plants. They would just
do you know
that,
or are you just making that assumption? Are you a farmer, Choco?
I grew up in a farming community, actually.
Did you really?
Before the liberals took over Northern California, the area where I grew up in was actually one of the last farming communities in the Delta region of Northern California in the Bay Area. Actually, when my parents moved there, they still had horse-drawn carriages going to the supermarket, and this was in the 90s. They had a bunch of fruit farms, apple trees and stuff. And I guess because San Francisco has a lot of power over that area and they want things to be more green or environmentally friendly, the farms couldn't stay with the regulations of what you're going to use this much water, that and that. So all these farms just disappeared, and we have now just a bunch of shopping malls and plazas over there. But it's funny, some farmers have not given up. So you see this giant 2-mile area of shopping malls and one lone farmhouse right in the middle of the parking lot. But
That's
I did
awesome.
grow up in a farming community, but most farmers know the more practical stuff because there's actually no need to know the scientific names of all these plants and stuff. It's just, you breed this plant with this plant, it'll be a hardier this plant. That's it.
There you go. I guess so. Yeah, well, that is interesting because the whole thing about the moldy onions is that Chief Bogo is grilling Judy about, this is stupid, you're a meter maid, you're supposed to stay, keep putting tickets on the cars, you went off, you did something we didn't assign you to do. Oh, and look, it was all worth it because you got moldy onions that someone was stealing. Now, Judy's rebuttal is that, no, sir, those are this blah, blah, blah plant, and they're a Class C botanical. So what we're meant to get from that is that something about these plants is special and that maybe it is a good reason that she stopped them. I mean, it makes you wonder, what's a Class C botanical?
And do you think, since they're putting so much focus on it, it's going to be a MacGuffin for later in the film?
No, I don't. I think
Okay.
you're wrong. Well,
right.
it's a good point. Shouldn't the chief know this? It's if this is some sort of special thing, it could be a prohibited item, contraband.
Maybe it's the
it could be
equivalent to
something else.
weed or something.
It's weed, yeah. It's so the guy doesn't even know what that looks like. It's dude, do your job. You're the chief of police. Come on, buy one, get one.
There's actually no... Okay, I'm looking up Classy Botanical to see if anything pops up, and the only thing that pops up is Zootopia.
Yeah.
So apparently there's no equivalent to Classy Botanical in our world. They just made it up
Well,
for the film.
I wonder if the plant is a real plant. If we searched for the scientific name, I
right.
bet they made that up too. That's my
Play the
guess.
jingle. This is our one Google search of
All
the
right,
episode.
I'm gonna do it. Let's see. I gotta make sure I spell it right. So it's Midnicampum Holocithius.
We really do need a Google jingle every time we
No,
Google
it's
search.
all Zootopia stuff. It's not a real thing.
Okay, see, if they made up something for the movie, it has to be a MacGuffin. That's actually what I thought when I
Well,
first saw this.
Or it's just attention to detail, because we've seen attention to detail in so many other areas of the film.
I mean,
already.
but they have carrots. Carrots are things in the real world. Why can't they replace, this middle campus thingy with something
The fact that they didn't use some generic thing, you mean? Like an apple or... I see what you're saying. Well, what I do want to know is it's a scientific name. It must follow Latin rules, right? So someone figure out what all that Latin means and get back to us with it. We could do that, but I don't want to do it right now.
Yeah, we already used our one Google search, thanks.
Yeah. So that'll be it for that. Well, moving right along in the film, we have Judy, again, trying to rebut, saying like, sir, I caught the crook, I did this thing. And he says, shut your tiny mouth, which is hilarious. I thought that was a very interesting insult and like maybe a little bit borderline. He is the chief of police, but what sort of ethics things do you think are in place? Is there, emotional abuse clauses and stuff like that? Is there an HR person Judy could go to if she felt threatened by Bogo?
So my impression would only be from the military side. And when you're in the military, they're really free to allow to talk to you because there's really no HR people in the military. And the military is meant to break you down. So you'll see like you go to any boot camp, they'll say racist things to you, things that offend your religion, looks and stuff. And it's just, there to kind of break down stuff.
Yeah, it's designed to...
Yeah, but the police force is a civilian workforce. So, and if you said shut your tiny mouth, like imagine if she was like a midget or a small person, wherever the proper term is. Apparently the proper term is dwarf in Britain.
I think, isn't it here,
person.
Isn't that the same here as well? It's because it's dwarfism.
I thought it was like little person or I don't know. California has a new term every year.
It probably depends. In Britain, that's interesting because I always think of like you got a British accent, you're in some high fantasy novel like Lord of the Rings. You're a dwarf.
So, but yeah, I guess if actually I just read an article today coincidentally that where I guess a little person or dwarf was taking his fiance out to a restaurant in Britain. And the waitress came and gave him a kid's menu and coloring book just because she saw it. Oh, no. But he laughed it off because he's used to it. So it's like for him, it was okay. But yeah, I could imagine it might be offensive to some, like, shut your little mouth.
I mean, there's certain types of people that I'm sure must have really thick skin because they're expecting that kind of thing all the time.
Yeah.
So that's something you can respect, I suppose. Anyway, moving along here as well, we have Bogo saying, look, your job isn't to chase this bad guy. Your job is to put tickets on cars when they have been parked too long. And Judy says, I don't want to do that. I want to be a real cop. And then we get to
be a real boy.
Yeah, she wants to be a real boy. Then we get to the best line of the minute, I think, where Bogo says, life isn't just some cartoony little musical game where you can sing a little song and all your problems go away. So just let it go. And of course, a wonderful reference, which could only have been intentional to everybody's favorite Disney franchise, Frozen.
Yep.
Woohoo. Which Disney can't seem to let go.
Life isn't some musical cartoon where you can sing a little song and all your insipid dreams magically come true. I like that he said insipid. Which is funny because when we think of Disney movies, we think of them as cartoon musicals. That's ever since Little Mermaid. That has kind of been the defining thing of the Broadway style of Disney films. And when you think about this, Zootopia is a Disney animated film. And it really has no musical numbers aside from the one main song.
No, it has a score.
Yeah.
And there are certain songs to it, but it isn't a musical.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if that's also a dig at the typical Disney, because we already see, like, within the first 30 minutes of talking about Zootopia, and it's crazy to think we're only half an hour in, but it's so different from the traditional Disney movie. Like, it's not based off of an pre-existing property, it's not a fairy tale, it doesn't have the princess, all this stuff, and it doesn't have that musical element that unites all the Disney movies. In fact, the other Disney movie film that came out the same year Zootopia was released, Moana, was in that style of Princess Disney musical, etc., etc., etc. And this film is not that, so it's already showing how it's not a traditional Disney movie. I think it's kind of hanging the lampshade on that with that comment.
Though it is all the same studio, isn't it?
Yes, this is a Disney animation.
Mm-hmm. So they did Moana too, they did Frozen, and they did Zootopia. So
there you go. It gives them credit. They were supposed to alternate. I think ever since Princess and the Frog, they were supposed to alternate. So every other year, it would be a traditional hand-drawn movie. The other year would be a CGI movie. But I think after the Winnie the Pooh movie, they just kind of gave up and just made all the movies CGI.
What if Zootopia fell at a different time and it ended up being hand-drawn? That's another interesting alternative idea.
It was already planned to be CGI because the other movie, Moana, was actually originally supposed to be hand-drawn. And there's been I think they released a lot of test reels of the movie where it was originally hand-drawn.
That's really interesting. I mean, I could see why you might choose Zootopia if you're going to have a movie that's CG and some of them are going to be 2D animation. I could see why Zootopia would be a good fit for 3D because then you get to have fun animating the fur You know, you have this great technology that's been developed over years of filmmaking in 3D, and you couldn't used to do detailed fur before. Pixar laid a lot of the groundwork for that working. They did, you know, in Monsters, Inc., they were like the first ones to develop how you can 3D animate realistic fur that will move in a realistic way. They also were the first ones to sort of figure out how to have shots go in altered gravity. WALL-E, obviously, was a lot of that took place in space, and they had to figure out all the space physics there, but they actually had a bit of practice with that when they did Finding Nemo. It's all underwater. You've got a little bit of the same kind of physics or the same look going on there.
And then they made Cars 2.
And didn't Cars 3 like just come out?
It just came out. I heard it's the only saving grace that is better than Cars 2.
Okay. I don't think I saw... Did I see Cars 2? I don't know. I'd have to rewatch all of them.
It's actually the worst movie. I list it as my worst movie of all time.
Well, I think Cars was the first Pixar movie that came out that didn't get fantastic ratings. Like, it was still okay.
But it's
good.
interesting that it was a dream project of one of the main original heads of Pixar, John Lasseter. It's like, you know, when you have that dream project in your head, but first you have to work on all the studio-approved projects before you finally can get up and work on your dream project.
Yeah.
Like Lauren Faust has to go and work on all these shows before I could finally work on Galaxy Girls, which sadly never happened.
No,
sorry,
it never
Lauren
did.
Faust.
But
this was Cars was his dream project, which is surprising. It's also the less, I don't know.
Well, now it makes you think, why did Cars do it? Because what I was going to say is that Cars was the first Pixar movie that came out that didn't get overwhelmingly positive reviews. It was still a lot of positive reviews, but it didn't blow people away the same way earlier Pixar films did. Cars had okay reviews. Cars 2 was the first Pixar movie to actually get bad reviews, like half or more negative reviews. And it makes you wonder, like, is there something inherent about Cars, the franchise, that makes it less, like, have less appeal or not do as well? Is it the stories of the characters? Is it the way they decided to animate it?
I think it's like a mixture of everything, because I was I was listening to some podcasts, YouTube reviewers, Double Toasted, who used to do the Spill.com, fantastic Austin-based movie review site. The folks at Double Toasted, they had, it's funny because they watched all 3 trailers and finally watched the movie, and it's just fantastic just hearing their hour-long debates about the physics of Cars, and they brought up some interesting points that I thought kind of added to why Cars wasn't successful. Every other Pixar movie takes place within the human world, that there's some type of connection. So even though the characters might be toys or dinosaurs or monsters, there's still some connection to humanity in the human world. The Cars universe is its own built universe that's disconnected to human world, yet these are creatures who are basically human-made items. So the physics of the world just completely falls apart. Like how are cars born, how did they grow, etc., etc. It's all this stuff. You have to build this world completely disconnected from the human world. And then not just that, every single Cars movie has a plot that takes something from another movie. Like Rocky is basically the storyline for the first Cars. The second Cars is a James Bond spy movie, and the third Cars is a mixture from things like DreamWorks Turbo to even Planes 2.
So they're retelling stories, but like everyone's a car. So.
Yeah, and they're taking like plots from so many different things that might work well on its own, but they're trying to mash all these plots together.
Yeah.
And they're not even borrowing from good sources, like the plots for the new Cars movie, Cars 3.
You just come into the boardroom one day, it's like, guys, what if X, but everyone's a car?
Yeah. And I don't think the characters are as relatable as people say. They don't actually really grow too much. I like the first Cars movie, but yeah, I can understand why there's a lot of disagreement about Cars.
I did like the first one. Have you seen, you're saying how do they grow? Have you seen that like art cutaway that shows Lightning McQueen, but he's got like internal organs?
That is
stuff?
Lovecraftian horror right there.
Yeah, it looks creepy. Well, here's the theory then. Maybe with Cars, maybe there are humans, but the Cars can't perceive them. And so it's a very metaphysical kind of movie where it's like the Cars' consciousness is generating this explanation for what's going on by giving them the illusion that they have free will, that they've traveled to this podunk town on Route 66 of their own volition, when really it was their driver that did that, and their consciousness is merely inventing a reason for that to have happened, which, by the way, is a real theory that people have about human consciousness and free will, that your brain just invents reasons for things.
If they hinted at that would be great, but that's just fan theories in the background.
Well, hold up. Did the Pizza Planet truck make it into Cars? Because that's what ties the whole Pixar universe together. The Pizza Planet truck.
I think that's
in all the movies.
It's fun speculation, but in the end, it's mostly pointless. Sure. It's like escapism for me, but no. But actually, like, there's like a lot of little things that doesn't make sense. Like, in the Cars universe, you have these tractors who are cows. yet they're not sentient. They don't talk like cows. They look like the other cars. The tractors look no different than any other cars, but they're treated like livestock and cattle. And
You're right. There's a hole in my theory.
Yeah, and it ties in back with the Zootopia thing about, when do we treat some animal species as sentient on our level, and when do we treat others as, lower? Like, the tractors are obviously treated as lesser, even though they look almost the same as any other regular car.
Right. And we had a question at the end of our live episode we did at Everfree. The last episode we did, someone asked about why we don't see avians or fish or insects. It's sort of along that same vein, right? Where do you draw the line? Which ones get to have sentience?
Well, because that will add problems, because in Tundra Town, they're shown having live fish markets, so...
Yeah, so they decided they needed protein for the animals to eat.
But yeah, I guess we did go a little bit off track, but to tie it back on track, talking
Cars
about
are perfectly pertinent to...
Well, talking about the Pixar and what Frozen did and the Frozen reference in this, and you're talking about the fur, they said that one animal in Zootopia has more strands of hair than all the characters in Frozen. So that kind of shows you how far we come from Frozen to Zootopia.
That's so cool to think about. Think about how much computer power they need for that to work, too.
Yeah.
It's an art. Making films like this really is an art and a science. There's a lot of technology that goes into it, and you got to keep track of that so you don't lose the appreciation there.
Yeah.
Well, that let it go thing was how we ended up on that whole long bunny trail, if you will, about cars and all that. But pretty much the only thing that happens after that in the minute is we have the otter character, which we know now is named Mrs. Otterton. She busts into Bogo's room, says, "Please, Chief Bogo, if I could just have 5 minutes of your time, please." And Clawhauser comes in, clearly very winded. Like, he's been running after this otter. He's like, "I'm sorry, sir." And that's the last thing we hear. The last thing we hear is, "I'm sorry." And then our minute ends. So we have to speculate as to why Mrs. Otterton has charged into Bogo's office. And we won't know till next minute.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, with the minute out of the way, guys, I know it's been so long since you've heard from any of us. We had quite a bit of recovery to do after Everfree Northwest, where we had a fantastic time with those of you that came to join us for our very first live episode we did. That was a ton of fun. We did minute 30, and wow, that was a great experience. Choco, do you have anything to share from that? Because I have a lot of things to share, but I want to hear from you.
Well, I was mostly sick at the con, and I actually didn't get con crud at the con itself. I got crud right before. I had a sore tickle in my throat. The Thursday I flew out. Friday I had a panel, and I completely lost my voice during the panel. And then Saturday, when we had our big panel, it was cracking. And you were even telling me, don't talk. For the con, like, save your voice just for the panel. Aside from that, it was pretty cool. If you guys were there, you saw my booth. My booth was by the exit. I got to hang out with Simul here, and him being a Seattle local, he got to show me around town again, which is fantastic because I have not been to Pike's Market and that area since my first Everfree about 3 years beforehand.
And which year was your first Everfree? 2015.
I want to say 2015.
15? Yeah.
So it's the newer of the cons that not the newer of the cons, but it's the cons I started coming to recently.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, it was a lot of fun. I'm glad I got to see you again, because we don't really see each other in person too often. It's really only at these conventions when that happens. Everfree and BronyCon, really. I think
these long distance relationships are not working out.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, first of all, again, before we forget, we should give a big shout out once again to AC Race Best, who was our special guest for our live episode at Everfree Northwest. Huge thanks to him. We thought that would be a lot of fun to do for our very first live episode. Yeah. He's known as being a big Zootopia fan, and it was really cool to have his perspective on the minute.
Yeah, he was one of the most requested. It's funny because I guess a lot of our listeners are from the Brony fandom, so we're booking a lot of guests. We're getting people in the comic book and animation industry, have a lot of these people lined up, but one of the most requested people is actually not someone who works on the show or any Zootopia related property. It's AC Racebest, who's for you guys who don't know, is a YouTuber and podcaster within the My Little Pony fandom, which actually is surprising. I actually did not know, like, I knew of him at cons, like he comes by my booth, we chat a bit, but I actually did not know what he really did in the fandom, and it was actually after our show with him that I actually went and checked out his stuff. But
yeah, he's known for the Bronies React series primarily.
Isn't that based off
Fine Bros?
The Fine Bros? Okay.
Yeah.
So wait,
it was because they did a kids react to, or teens react to My Little Pony or something, and so the very first Bronies React was a response to that.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the early days of the Pony Brony fandom, it was really the artists who were like kind of like the big show stars, guests of honor at cons and stuff. And then it really moved on to like the musicians. And now, within the last 2 years, I think it's the YouTubers who've been really hyped as community guests of all these cons and stuff. And even though I have a lot of friends who are Brony YouTubers, I just don't know too much about that area. And it's fascinating to see, okay, this is another way that the fandom expresses its creativity by ranting on YouTube. Like, well, we are doing, I guess, because we're on YouTube now. We just post whatever we want to talk about.
Well, here's an interesting thought about that, because for a long time I've viewed the most notable, or the names that get recognized the most among people in the fandom, the big name fans in the My Little Pony community, for the most part have been musicians. You've got a lot of really well recognized names out there: Mando Pony, Living Tombstone, Mike the Microphone. See, some of those are so retro now, like aren't even involved anymore.
He was at the furry con I was at.
I saw. That looked so fun. I really wish I could have been there. It seemed like everyone I knew was at Biggest Little Furcon in Reno, and I'm like, I want to go there so much.
It was fun. I got to hand out some Zootopia Minute business cards. I got to find the Nick who took a picture with our sign, and I got to say I'm not furry. That's dope.
Woo! Yeah, I'm sure that's convincing. Well, anyway, what I was saying is musicians I always viewed as being like the biggest or the most recognized big name fans in the Brony community.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if that's any more the case, because I feel like the music scene has sort of diminished somewhat. Concerts aren't as big a deal at PonyCons anymore, not as much as they have been in the past. And now we're starting to see cosplayers and YouTubers getting a lot more attention. And the thing is, I think it's because, and I could be totally wrong about this, and guys, leave a comment if you disagree with me, or if you agree, just let us know your thoughts on this. But I think that the community has shifted and evolved. It all began online, and there's still a lot of online presence, but now a whole lot of it is down to in-person interaction. That's kind of the shift that happened with me personally. And I think now cons have been a stronghold for holding the community together. And so a lot of the recognition comes from what you do at conventions. It's so weird because I realize I don't get recognized a whole lot online for or things I've done online necessarily. I'd like to, something I'm working on anyway. But I'll get recognized between conventions. Like, oh, you're the guy that did this at that other con, or oh, you're Hoofbeats from BronyCon, or oh, you ran Ponegathon and all these things at Everfree. And it seems like the recognition I'm getting is from what I'm doing at conventions. And so I think that's why we've seen a shift from music being a huge deal, because there are still concerts, but they're not as well attended anymore. The music got out there initially because of YouTube. It was all online. Now we're seeing a shift in attention towards the people that are very visible at conventions, and that's the cosplayers, it's the vloggers, the people that go around doing YouTube stuff, the people that run panels. That's just a theory of mine anyway. I think the attention has been shifting.
See, this would be a good time to plug my book if it was out now, but I've been working on that convention history book, and there's big section just on the Brony community. And no, I think you're kind of right, because I initially divided the Brony fandom into kind of 3 eras based on the big group or network that was in charge. And you could easily say the early stage was Sophisto and his Equestria Daily.
Equestria Daily was huge, yeah.
Yeah, the middle stage was definitely Final Draft and his Everfree network. And then the later stage is the Josh Dean Cabal and the BronyCon Con Network. And when I was saying, like, who were the most famous people of these times, you'll see the early stages was the artists. It was like Pixel Kitties and whatnot. And it was because Equestria Daily was a big one. And what does Equestria Daily mostly do? Promote fan art. And then the middle stages, it was the musicians who were the big name headliners and stuff. And why? Because who was streaming the cons and promoting all the music and stuff? It was the networks like Everfree and other similar pony networks like Derpy News and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then now that it's at con people who are being promoted, it's because the Brony cons are now the dominant thing. And yeah, so you can kind of see who is seen as the big guest is depending on what is the dominant uniting pony group that's in charge. And you start seeing a lot of people who are at cons being recognized, like you said, for just their con stuff. Because most people, they initially knew me for my art and Tumblr blog, but now they know me, because I used to work this con or event at this con and whatnot and whatnot. And you see a lot of the YouTubers actually get big, because at first, when they started inviting YouTubers as community guests, it started with just a few small cons like the Midwest. And people are like, oh, who are these guys? Who are these YouTubers? But because they're guests, they must be important. So people go to their panels, seeing they like them, they start joining and following these YouTubers, and these YouTubers become really, really big. In fact, bigger than the musicians that I think you noted at Pony Stock this year. You noticed a falling out of interest in concerts and stuff. And then now it's the panels that these YouTubers are doing that are really taking up all the audience attention. In fact, the fact that we just had AC Race Fest at our panel, I think helped to fill up all the spots in the big room we had. So they do have some interesting power within the fandom too, I guess, a good following. So it is interesting to see this kind of evolution of what the fandom kind of likes or looks up to or groups around.
Yeah, and I'm willing to bet, because I really do think we're onto something here. I'm willing to bet that you will see that the same pattern has already occurred in earlier fandoms, because something I've already observed is that in the furry community, it seems a lot of the people that are famous for running conventions, because conventions are so important to the furry fandom. These like in-person interactions, art is too, all the online stuff is too, but cons are so important to the furry fandom that you're well known simply by virtue of the fact that you run a con. It seems like if you're the chair of a con in the furry convention, every furry knows who you are, is my perception anyway. And I feel like that's starting to happen with our fandom as it ages.
Which adds actually to a lot of problems too, because like for my con history book, I want to focus on like people who actually run cons well. And I've been getting so I've been reaching out to a lot of like con cheers and stuff, but then I have a lot of con cheers for like lesser known cons, but they somehow think they're like Top Gun people and just say, hey,
there's a lot of egos.
Well. So like, I don't know you, and it doesn't look like your con is being run that particularly well, so I don't want to interview you. I want to interview this guy who's run, San Diego Comic-Con for like a decade, not someone who run a small con in Nashville for 2 years or something like that. No, but it's interesting because like you brought up that interesting point, and you're bringing up that cosplayers are being big now. And it's interesting that in the last few months, I went to some Comic Cons and anime cons, and who are the big community guests there? It's the cosplayers. The cosplayers even get their own booths where they could do signings and photo ops and stuff. And surprised that the pony fandom's kind of following suit. We have a lot of cosplayers now as community guests, which kind of surprises me, but that's the trend it's going to. And then some fandoms have people who are big in areas that are not really that well recognized. Like when I went to BLFC, I'm surprised that the big people who are recognized at FurCons are not really the cosplayers or the artists and stuff, but it's the dancers, surprisingly enough. Dancing is a very, very big thing in the furry fandom. There's dance competitions. All of famous people at the, I guess, Popufur people at the FurryCon were all dancers. And that's something we don't actually have in the pony fandom. We don't have dancers who are recognized or invited as community guests or guests of honor. It's kind of interesting to see what constitutes as being fan or community famous within each of the little fandoms and niches.
It has evolved, and I'm sure it will continue to evolve. Well, going back a little bit, you were sick at Everfree, which was unfortunate because, your voice was a little bit affected. If people go back and watch that live episode we did, minute 30, he is a little bit scratchy in the throat, you can tell. And it was just cracked. Well, it was unfortunate to me because it seemed like it was just going on and on and on. Like it wasn't gone by the time you left and flew back home, because after the con we hung around a bit. I showed you, we went to Pike Place Market downtown. We walked around there. We walked along the waterfront, got some seafood downtown Seattle. And then we took the monorail up to Seattle Center and went up the Space Needle. And I believe there's photos of that on our Twitter if you guys want to see those. We were up at the top of the Space Needle. Some of the very few selfies I posted. Yeah, up at the top of the Space Needle. Yeah, that's right. A few selfies. I remember the first time I actually saw you at Everfree after we'd been talking online was like the first time I had any clue what you looked like at all, or like whether you were male or female or anything.
I could have been like a stalker girl.
I had no clue who I was talking to really, other than like, oh, you wanted to interview me for this book. But
I'm so sorry.
You went to a lot of cons in a row following Everfree, following our time in Seattle. Yeah. And so how many of those were they? What were they? And when did that sickness end, if it did at all?
It was about 3 weeks, and it's funny because it went in cycles. So I got the early stages at Everfree. So it started as just a sore throat, and then became like a cough. And then like towards the end, like I was staying at your place, and you saw that I had to take all these pills and stuff because it was a mixture of like headaches and stuff. But then I didn't really get any sniffling and stuff until after I got back home. And then that's when I got the sniffling and mucus buildup and whatnot. And it seemed like I was just working through a bunch of stuff. Because I think it probably ended within 2 weeks. But then the week after, it was all allergies and colds. And the crazy thing was between Everfree and then the next con, which was BLFC, I had to do a bunch of book signings for my new book release. So that was rough because I really wanted to cancel the book signing. But I was invited back to my old military academy. I had to speak with the Corps cadets. Like the hour I got off the plane, I had to speak to the Corps cadets. And then the day after, Saturday, I had to speak to a lot of the old alumni from like the 50s, the board member, president of the academy, the generals, all that stuff. So that was kind of like...
And you got your hair cut.
Really stressful. Yeah, I had to get a haircut too because I didn't want to go back to a military school with a long hair. So I got cut but still dye, so it looked kind of weird. But I did... They liked the speeches really well, which is surprised because I was really sick and I was going to cancel the trip, but they already paid for it, so I kind of had to begrudgingly go out. But it was fantastic going back to the military school after, I think, 7 years.
And it seemed like they treated you really well. Like, you're posting photos of, like, parades and stuff and, like, these big...
yeah. I'm surprised how well they were really doing it. Like, they had the alumni luncheon. I was the guest of honor for the Army-Navy luncheon, which was surprising because that luncheon was there to honor, like, a 4-star general from Thailand who graduated from the academy. But the 4-star general from Thailand was not the guest speaker. I was the guest speaker. And
was the 4-star general from Thailand there?
Yeah, he was there. I got a picture of him afterwards. He's fantastic. But cool. No, I had like, it's funny. They set up all the books for me. Like, actually, the first day I got back after the speech cadets, they actually took me to my hotel room, shoved a bunch of books in there, and said, like, yeah, 100 books signed by tomorrow. I'm like, okay. So I was like, kind of like working like a slave, like that night, trying to sign 100 books.
Do your wrist exercises, shake it out.
But the luncheon speech was fantastic because I got to they actually set up a giant table of all my books prepared. They made up signs for me. They got me up, and I was actually able to I did the same speech for both cadets and both the alumni / board, but I was able to like change it slightly so it appealed to both. Like when I was talking to the cadets, the first thing I joked about was like, hey, where's the best Pokemon Go stops around here? And when I was talking to the alumni, I got to make jokes about hippies and stuff, and they loved it. They're like, oh yeah, I'm from Texas and stuff, but yeah, I'm going back to California. And actually, it's funny, I actually snuck in some pro-California speech there, so if anybody recorded it and need a candidate for the pro-California independence movement, I'm the perfect Robert E. Lee for the job. But no, it was nice. I got to frame the speech around, well, you know, we don't really have good role models. The last two candidates we had for president are both crooks from New York City. Those are not really good role models for kids. And both those candidates, Hillary and Trump, got into power either through marriage or inheritance, which is not really a good way to, you know, inspire kids. So I kind of talked about the founder of the school, a guy who was honest, you know, was a poor man, but hardworking, had a dream, had a vision, and did not want to be corrupted. He didn't want to take handouts from people. He didn't want to mold his school in particular ways because people were offering money. He was certain to have a dream and he fell through with it. And even though he probably died thinking of his life as a failure, he had a lasting impression on military schools in the Southwest. Like at least 25 military schools stretching from Texas all the way to California, all influenced by him, and everyone who screwed him over. So the people who bought out his school or tried to take over his school or fired him, all these people, they died and became irrelevant. Even though they had money, fame in their time, they didn't have the vision like he did. So it was a really good speech. And then afterwards, Sunday, I was one of the alumni honored at the parade. So they had all the entire Corps cadets march past us, salute us. So it was a fantastic event.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was good. So
yeah, well, that's
not every
cool.
day you get to be honored by a military academy.
So that's right. You had Everfree, and the following weekend you had that event at your military school, and then
I was traveling all throughout Southern California, going to a bunch of bookshops for book signings for about a week.
Yeah.
So that was kind of stressful. So
and then the next weekend was straight into another con, right? Then
BOFC, though. Maybe we should save that one for another episode.
Sure thing, yeah. We are stretching out our time a little bit in this one, which I'm okay with because, again, we left you guys with kind of a big long gap of about a month with no content here. So here you go, special extra long episode for you guys. Yeah. But I suppose we should just about wrap it up. So
yeah. But if you want to hear about the Furry Con, stay tuned for next episode.
Yeah, for 32. There you go. But again, guys, thank you so much for listening to Zootopia Minute. We again apologize for the wait, but we really appreciate that you have stuck around to keep listening to us. If you are a new listener, thank you so much as well. If you saw us at Everfree, enjoyed it, thank you so much for coming and checking us out. It was a lot of fun. We hope to do more live episodes at more events in the future. But yeah, for all things Zootopia Minute, be sure to follow us on our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. That's at Zootopia Minute. As well, you can also email us with your thoughts, questions, concerns, comments, anything you like at zootopiaminute@gmail.com. And other than that, please just stay tuned to our YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to that as well. That's where you'll get all our comment, nice, fresh, and hot.
And speaking of YouTube, we want to thank you for allowing us to cross the 100 subscriber mark.
Yeah, that's right. We did it just in time for that. Well, guys, that'll be it from us for now. Stay tuned. We will be back very soon. Take it easy, guys.
Bye.